In 1989, Japan's asset prices were soaring. Today, the yen sits at a 37-year low, and Germany just overtook its economy. How did an unstoppable empire of wealth surrender its global power in just 3 decades? The answer lies in a fatal financial illusion. During the late 1980s, Japan seemed invincible. Real estate prices soared to absurd heights, and the Tokyo Stock Exchange dominated global markets. Wealth was everywhere. But beneath this roaring surface, a dangerous speculative frenzy was quietly building up, threatening to unravel everything. By late 1989, the Bank of Japan realized the danger. To deliberately deflate this massive speculation, they sharply raised interbank lending rates. It was a necessary surgical strike. Yet this single decision would prick the bubble and trigger an unprecedented financial catastrophe across the nation. The reaction was brutal and swift. By August 1990, the Nikkei index had plummeted to exactly half its peak value. Trillions of dollars vanished almost overnight. Land prices collapsed by 60%. The glorious empire of illusion was crumbling, leaving behind mountains of toxic debt. The bubble burst violently. Therefore, the financial system should have collapsed, naturally clearing out all the bad debt. Painful, yes, but necessary for a healthy recovery. This is how capitalism is supposed to work. But Japan chose a much darker, heavily manipulated path. Instead of taking the immediate pain, Japanese authorities panicked. They refused to let failing banks die. Why did they fear the short-term pain so desperately? The answer would trap them in a cycle of endless money printing, sacrificing their future to save yesterday's mistakes. These financial institutions became known as zombie banks. They were technically dead, suffocated by bad loans, but kept artificially breathing through government bailouts and regulatory loopholes. They stopped lending to new businesses, slowly choking the life out of Japan's once dynamic economy. From 1991 to 2003, Japan's average annual growth rate was a stagnant 14%. While the rest of the world boomed, Japan simply survived. The once feared economic giant was slowly fading into irrelevance, trapped in a self-inflicted purgatory of low growth. The damage was not just temporary. Between 1995 and 2025, Japan's share of the world's nominal GDP collapsed from 17.8% down to a mere 3.6%. Real wages fell by 11%. This was an unprecedented drop in actual wealth among developed nations. Japan traded short-term stability for a 30-year collapse in real wealth. The immediate pain was avoided, but a slow, agonizing decline took its place. How exactly did keeping zombie banks alive lead to endless money printing? The terrifying mechanics are just beginning. By 1992, Japanese banks watched land and stock prices fall 60% from their peak. They were drowning in unpayable bad debt. But instead of accepting reality, regulators made a choice that would paralyze the nation for 30 years. Why did they hide the losses? A true banking collapse would have triggered a catastrophic 1930s-style depression. So, the government offered massive bailouts and regulatory forbearance. They kept dead institutions breathing, creating a financial monster known as zombie banks. These zombie banks stopped lending to innovative startups. Instead, they endlessly rolled over bad loans for failing companies just to avoid acknowledging losses on their balance sheets. Capital was trapped. Fresh ideas were starved of oxygen. The economy slowly suffocated, but the banks were only half of the problem. Look at the companies themselves. Economist Richard Koo identified a terrifying phenomenon: the balance sheet recession. Japanese corporations weren't trying to maximize profits anymore. They were terrified of their own debt. Imagine a company whose land collateral dropped by 60%. They still owed the full original loan. Their priorities shifted completely. They used every single yen of cash flow not to invest, not to grow, but to pay down debt. When one company pays down debt, it is prudent. But when every company does it simultaneously, money stops circulating. No spending means no revenue. No revenue means no growth. From 1991 to 2003, Japan's GDP grew at an average of just 14% annually. The government tried to replace this missing private demand with stimulus, but it was never enough. In your view, was keeping these zombie banks alive a necessary evil or a fatal mistake? Share your thoughts in the comments. They saved the banks from immediate failure, avoiding a total depression. But this artificial life support created a suffocating environment. It was a quiet, slow decline. Economic growth stagnated on the operating table, kept alive only by endless state intervention. The price of this survival was absolute stagnation. Japan's nominal GDP fell from $55 trillion in 1995 to just $27 trillion in 2025. The economy was shrinking in absolute dollar terms while the rest of the world moved forward. The zombies had eaten the future, but the Bank of Japan was not done. If keeping bad banks alive killed domestic growth, their next move would erode the nation's global purchasing power entirely. They were about to print money like never before. The bubble had burst, but the real nightmare was just beginning. For over a decade, Japan's economy remained frozen in time. A once unstoppable economic superpower could not restart its engine. But why did the machinery stall completely? What do you think caused Japan's deflation trap? And we'd love to hear your answer in the comments. The answer was a silent, invisible force: deflation. Persistent deflation set in, creating a vicious cycle of falling prices. Instead of spending, the Japanese watched prices drop year after year. A dangerous psychological shift took hold, transforming a temporary recession into a permanent stagnation trap. Economist Paul Krugman diagnosed this as a liquidity trap. Consumers hoarded cash because goods would be cheaper tomorrow. Why buy a television today if it costs less next month? This rational individual choice became a catastrophic collective disaster for the entire Japanese economy. Traditional monetary policy became completely useless. The Bank of Japan slashed interest rates, trying to stimulate borrowing. But how do you convince people to spend when holding cash is mathematically smarter than investing it? The standard economic toolkit was effectively dead. If prices always fall, the economy grinds to a halt. Faced with this terrifying reality, would you spend your savings today or wait for a better deal tomorrow? Tell me what you would do in the comments. The government was running out of options. The situation was dire, but Japanese leaders refused to accept reality. They kept insolvent institutions operating, creating a financial purgatory. These zombie banks could not lend to new businesses, suffocating innovation. The life support machine was keeping the patient alive, but barely breathing. This endless stagnation destroyed real wealth. From 1995 to 2025, real wages in Japan fell by approximately 11%, an unprecedented drop among developed nations. Workers were getting poorer every year, watching their purchasing power evaporate in slow motion. Consequently, Japan's global power evaporated. Its share of the world's nominal GDP collapsed from 8% in 1995 to a mere 6% in 2025. The giant that once threatened American economic dominance was shrinking into irrelevance on the world stage. Traditional interest rate cuts had completely stopped working. Therefore, the Bank of Japan had to invent something entirely new to force inflation. They were about to cross a line that no major central bank had ever crossed before in modern history. Their radical experiment would only deepen the crisis. They would print money on a scale never seen before, desperately trying to wake the stagnant economy. But this massive intervention would accidentally set a trap that Japan might never escape. The deflation trap had teeth. In 2013, the Bank of Japan launched its most aggressive experiment ever. They called it quantitative and qualitative monetary easing. It was not just a policy adjustment. It was a financial flood, an unprecedented attempt to drown decades of deflation under trillions of newly printed yen. The central bank launched a staggering plan of immense scale. They bought government bonds, corporate debt, and even stocks. No central bank in modern history had ever attempted anything this radical. Japan was entering completely uncharted financial territory. The goal was simple: spark inflation, weaken the yen, make Japanese exports cheaper and corporate profits soar. They flooded the global markets with yen, hoping the currency would weaken just enough to help exports. But the floodgates never closed. Here is the question nobody asked. What happens when you print money, but the real economy is rotten from within? If you want to understand how nations enrich and destroy themselves, consider subscribing for our next episode on the human cost of collapse. By 2016, the Bank of Japan went even further. They introduced negative interest rates of -0.1%. For the first time, banks were charged to park their own money at the central bank. The message was clear: lend or bleed. The logic was brutal. Punish banks for holding cash, force them to lend to businesses and consumers. But the zombie banks did not need borrowers. They needed to survive. And the zombie companies did not need loans. They needed to die. Here is what the central bankers refused to see. You cannot print your way out of structural decay. The zombie economy was still there, suffocating productivity, trapping capital in dead companies. No amount of printed yen could fix a system that rewarded failure. The yen did weaken, but it never stopped weakening. By July 2024, the currency hit 161 yen per dollar, a 37-5-year low. The real effective exchange rate collapsed to its lowest level since records began in 1970. The flood had become a drowning, and the consequences were devastating. Japan's nominal GDP fell from $555 trillion in 1995 to just $4.27 trillion in 2025. Real wages dropped 11%, an unprecedented collapse among developed nations. The printing press did not save Japan. It masked the rot. Japan lost its place as the world's third-largest economy to Germany. A nation once expected to overtake America had been quietly sinking for 30 years. But the most terrifying consequence was not economic. It was demographic, and it was already too late to stop. In 1995, Japan's economy was a towering $55 trillion titan. By 2025, that exact same economy had brutally shrunk to $4.27 trillion. How does a global superpower lose over $1 trillion in absolute wealth over 30 years? The answer lies in the quiet devastation of the Japanese worker. From 1995 to 2025, real wages fell by a staggering 11%. This was not a typical recession. It was an unprecedented collapse in purchasing power for a developed nation. If you want to understand more economic mysteries like this, subscribe to our channel. While the government propped up failing zombie banks, the people paid the hidden tax. But if domestic purchasing power was quietly collapsing, what was happening to Japan standing on the global stage? The numbers tell a truly devastating story. In 1995, Japan commanded a massive 8% of the world's nominal GDP. It was an unstoppable economic empire. Yet by 2025, that global share had brutally collapsed to a mere 6%. The empire had effectively crumbled. Did Japanese leaders not see this happening? Or did they simply refuse to look? The truth is, the policy of endless money printing demanded a very heavy sacrifice. That sacrifice was the total destruction of their currency's value. By July 2024, the consequences were undeniable. The yen plummeted to 161 per US dollar, hitting a 37-5-year low. Ultra-loose monetary policy had finally broken the back of what was once the world's third-largest economy. The weakened yen delivered the final blow. Japan lost its status as the world's third-largest economy, surpassed by a resurgent Germany. Decades of avoiding short-term pain resulted in a permanent loss of global economic power. They printed money, they saved the banks, they avoided the pain. But the illusion of stability came at a catastrophic cost. By refusing to let the market clear, Japan traded a severe recession for a 30-year collapse. The true cost of the zombie economy was now laid bare. Bad debt was never written off. Failing institutions were kept alive. The domestic experiment was over, but its dangerous ripple effects were just beginning to form. Avoiding short-term pain only delayed and magnified the disaster. The zombie economy's structural failures rippled outward, threatening global financial stability. But what does this mean for the rest of the world today? The next video explains. Japan's nominal GDP fell from $55 trillion in 1995 to $27 trillion in 2025. This wasn't just a burst bubble. It was a deliberate choice to keep zombie banks alive, trading short-term stability for a 30-year collapse in real wealth. Former Fed official James Bullard warned that the US and other Western economies could face a Japanese-style outcome. The parallels are striking. Aging populations, massive government debt, and central banks endlessly printing money to keep failing institutions afloat. Are we walking the exact same path? When central banks choose bailouts over economic renewal, they don't save the economy, they freeze it. Japan's real wages fell by 11% over 30 years, an unprecedented drop among developed nations. The legacy of Japan's lost decades is a cautionary tale. Demographic decline, soaring debt, and relentless money printing can trap a superpower. Japan's share of world nominal GDP collapsed from 17.8% in 1995 to just 3.6% in 2025. In 2023, Japan lost its position as the world's third-largest economy to Germany. The weak yen and stagnant nominal GDP were direct results of decades of ultra-loose monetary policy. This included negative interest rates of -0.1% introduced in 2016. The yen hit a 37-5-year low in July 2024, reaching 161 per US dollar. The once mighty currency that threatened to buy America was now worth pennies. This is the ultimate price of inflating away debt rather than allowing necessary economic restructuring. The Japanese tragedy proves that printing money cannot cure structural decay. It merely delays the reckoning, turning a sharp recession into a slow, agonizing multi-decade decline. The wealth of a nation is built on productivity, not liquidity. The warning is clear. When governments prioritize protecting bad debt over fostering innovation, they condemn their citizens to stagnation. Real wealth evaporates and global power fades. The Japanese miracle was undone by a fatal refusal to accept failure. Japan's 30-year decline is not just a history lesson. It is a mirror reflecting the dangerous path Western central banks might be walking today. We must ask if our own financial systems are making the exact same fatal mistakes. But that is a story for another video. To understand how nations enrich themselves and how they go bankrupt, consider subscribing for the next episode. It will explore the modern debt crisis threatening the global economy today.